First, I want to quickly introduce kind of the topic and the panelists that we have here today. First off, we're going to be talking today about how a focus on your customers can help you hit your 2023 revenue targets. This is going to cover everything from customer marketing and marketing operations support to the implementation process, the post-sale customer support process, the planning process for 2023 and how RevOps can support that, and probably everything in between and a lot more. And so we've got an incredible panel here today. So let me go ahead and introduce myself and then introduce the panelists as well. So me, I'm Matt, the CEO and co-founder of RevOps Co-op. RevOps Co-op is a global community of 6,500 plus people who are all passionate about revenue operations. So the community is free to join. If you're not in the community already, we'd definitely love to have you be a part of it. Aaron, if you can throw the URL for the community into the chat, that would be awesome. And then the panelists that we have here today. So first off, I want to introduce Peter McCoy, the CEO and founder of Baton. For those of you not familiar with either Peter or Baton, Baton is a leading customer onboarding platform for managing software implementations, trusted by some of the world's fastest growing software companies. Their product is pretty darn incredible. And so if you are not familiar with them and you want to make a great first impression on your new customers, I would definitely encourage you to take a look at their solution. But the reason why we got Peter here is he's obviously building a company in the kind of post-sale customer support implementation space. So he's got some great perspective there, and kind of looking forward to hearing some of the things he has to say about how that can help you drive expansion revenue, improved renewal rates, increased net dollar retention, all of that good stuff. So Peter, thank you for being here, my friend. And I think he said his favorite holiday movie is what? Elf. So I like that. We support that. Next up, we've got Camela Thompson, who is the VP of Marketing at CaliberMind. Hello, Camela. I've known Camela for a while, and while she won't say it, I will. She is an absolute rock star and a true kind of RevOps unicorn. She's got great perspective on a lot of things. She's been in RevOps, marketing ops, sales ops for a decade or decades. And now she leads marketing at an early stage and growing SaaS company. So she's got some awesome perspective on things from RevOps to marketing ops to marketing, and excited to get her viewpoints, especially on some things like customer marketing. So Camela, thank you for joining and for being here. And then last but not least, we have Jeff Ignacio, who is the head of sales operations and marketing operations at Forethought.ai. A lot of you may already know Jeff. He has these great little jingles like the 12 ways of RevOps that I know he posts, I think, annually on LinkedIn. So if you don't follow him on LinkedIn, definitely would encourage you to do that. But Jeff has big company experience. He's worked at places like Google, Amazon, and he's also led revenue operations at early stage companies like Upkeep and currently Forethought. So tons of RevOps knowledge, definitely a unique perspective that he brings to the table. And so excited to kind of hear some of his thoughts today on, again, how a focus on your customers can help you all hit your revenue targets in 2023. So let's, I guess, dive in and start to kind of go around the horn on some of this stuff. So I guess, like I said, today we're talking about how a focus on your current customers can act as fuel for growth in 2023. But I guess to get us started, let's talk about just 2023 planning. So I guess I'd be curious to hear from each of you. Where are you at first in your 2023 planning process? Are you done? You almost done? Have you started? And what are some things that might be in the mix for next year that maybe hadn't been on the table in years prior? It might be useful for some other folks to consider. So Jeff, I know in our kind of prep meeting, I know you had some interesting things to say about just the planning side of things. So maybe start with you. Like, how's 2023 planning going at Forethought? Where are you guys at? And what are some things in the discussion for you, today that haven't been in the past?
Yeah, I'd say I'm spending maybe half my time writing jingles. The other half doing RevOps planning. In all seriousness, I'm at a Series B or Series C startup. So there's a bit of we're VC backed. So there's a top-down motion, which we pair with our bottoms-up motion. The top-down motion is mostly done. That is a heavy finance and kind of CEO-driven exercise. The bottoms-up is actually where I spend a lot of my time. And so when I think about it in discrete phases, it's one, reviewing the product roadmap, understanding, what's my work backwards plan from major releases. What is that going to mean in terms of TAM, SAM, and SOM that we can go after? And then from there, there's ancillary work that goes into personas and ICPs, which we're revisiting. So that part is locked in, completed. And now I'm going through industry and segmentation analysis, which is going to then lead into the territory work that I'm about to go through as well. Post territory, break it down into headcount capacity planning, roles and responsibility definitions, the hiring plan, and then going into territory rollout, comp design. So there's a lot of things that you want to tackle in phases. But it's December 7th and I'm on a calendar fiscal. I'm particularly feeling a little bit of squishiness for the deadlines.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that planning is at least in full force. So Peter, Camela, what about you? How's planning kind of going? And especially curious too, like, December of last year, I'm guessing, some different things were, probably being discussed when it came to, planning for the new year that may or may not be on the table for this year. So what are some of the differences from your perspectives?
I'll let you go, Peter.
Sure. I think there's just, we do kind of, as Jeff mentioned, top down. We're a bit smaller. We're still like, I guess, technically by money raise, we'd probably be a Series A. We've only raised one round in the customer company's life. So, there's that. I think there's a lot of top down pressure dependent on, how involved your investors and board are in the company. They have different perspectives on what they want you to do. We're fortunate we're still pushing for a growth year. We believe in what we're doing. If you look back, probably a little hot topic now, but if you read back like Mark Benioff, I love reading his letters to the board and the shareholders. And one of his biggest regrets, and this isn't for everyone, was that in like 2008, he didn't put his foot on the gas, right? It takes so long. I'm sure the people here could speak far more eloquently than I, but to like re-spin up a sales machine after you've kind of cut a lot of it, takes a lot of wind out of your organization, takes a lot of that opportunity off your table. And I'm not saying, everyone shouldn't trim or whatever they need to do, but, if you feel strongly about your product market fit, your product in the market and the demand for what you're doing, especially in this new kind of environment where everything needs to be like dollars back on what we're spending on software, like, we're looking at, a little bit more gas on the fire because we believe in kind of the Baton mission, what we're putting out there, and that, like, frankly, whether it's morbid or not, like this sort of a market plays to the product we're selling. So for us, it's, looking at being cautiously optimistic on planning, and, we're pretty much done.
Yeah. I like that, especially, like the, thinking about doing things differently or differentiating, right? Like you said, the, initial reaction may be, oh, hey, the market's doing what the market's doing. Let's maybe be a little bit cautious. Everyone else is being cautious, right? I don't want to be the next one to announce layoffs or, things like that. But that may be the exact opposite of what you actually want to do, especially if that's what maybe some of your competitors might be doing. But Camela, what do you think? Like, how are things going on your end, especially planning for, overall marketing, for next year? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think I'm in a lucky situation. We have a really mature infrastructure for marketing analytics, so it's really easy for me to prove my ROI, and that is not true for most people. So it's a pretty clear path from spend to pipeline to bookings. So planning went pretty quickly. We've wrapped it up. And what's different than I think a lot of folks, and I know we're planning on covering this a bit later, but we're not taking off the gas on digital advertising. So that's one of the first things that gets cut. And I think one of the ways people can differentiate is look at those terms that used to be super expensive and start investing in areas that are a little bit more, maybe you're not making the long tail keyword plays anymore. Maybe you're putting more money into stuff that's more directly relevant. So that's just one thing that's a little bit different.
Yeah. Well, I guess on that note, I mean, we, we talked about this a little bit. Well, and, the purpose for today, right, focusing on your customers and how those can act as fuel for revenue growth. But before we get to, maybe our new friend there, let's talk about the old classic, which is, to grow revenue, I need new business, new customer acquisition. Peter mentioned, right, if you feel good about, the things that your company or your product is doing, cutting marketing or sales, spend may not be the thing that you want to do. This may be the time that you should do the exact opposite, is like invest there. So what are some of those things, Camela, on the marketing side that, that you're looking at this year? It sounds like, digital ad and spend there is not an area that you're cutting. But maybe get into some specifics there, and like, what are some other areas that folks can think about that, maybe on the chopping block, but they should maybe think twice before doing anything next year.
So I have to say, investing in community relationships and those partnerships, that's not something we're changing. Digital advertising, and then especially if you're in an early stage company where you've recently raised a round and cash flow isn't the issue, it's new logo acquisition. Really think about the platforms out there where people are putting reviews and trying to make decisions about which product purchase. So those are the three big areas I think that we focus, but I'm going to state the obvious. Millennials are gaining share in that buyer pool. They're over half now, and they buy differently than what was traditionally done. So much more groupthink, much more digitally focused. So I think a lot of companies are going to be forced to kind of flip the paradigm and stop focusing on cold prospecting first and start focusing on their digital presence and investing in marketing a little bit earlier.
What do you think about that, Jeff?
So on the marketing side, let's just be frank, right? Like we're in an environment, depending on your business, where cash flow from operations is going to be par for the course. Cash flow from financing, particularly external from VCs or PEs, are unproven and unknown at the moment. The vanity metrics that we all have to prove out whether we're going to get to that next round are changing dramatically. So many companies have made a layoff. Marketing spend has been impacted depending on the business. So you have, with that potentially smaller set of resources, you have to figure out what plays are going to make the most sense. The way I'm thinking about it now is, how do we find a balance of doubling down on what works while not sacrificing some of the differentiation that we need to think through for next year? So paid demand channels tend to get saturated depending on your the addressable market that you can potentially go after. So for example, if you're on paid social, particularly if you're B2C, you're on Instagram, you're on TikTok. If you're on B2B, you're in LinkedIn primarily for the most part, maybe Twitter if you're still on the Elon train. But those channels get saturated, and you'll see it in your click-through rates. And so the idea of tilling over your like a crop, your creatives, maybe even changing your messaging. I think we've all zigged towards like do more with less, recession language. It might be refreshing to change it up and be different. So when everyone's racing toward this way, maybe it might make the most sense to run the other way. The second is doubling down on content and different organic strategies. So I still love the idea of podcasts, blogs, communities, cabs. The idea of ways to bring in more organic and direct traffic onto your site, and hopefully it's not dark social is the bogeyman word that everyone likes to use. But so the idea of constructing a marketing plan for next year is finding that balance. You don't want to over-index on a particular channel, is my personal preference. So how do we create a diverse set of marketing strategies that we can reasonably execute on for next year? Those are some of the challenges I'm working on now, but you have to get there first and foremost by having strong attribution, strong modeling, a rhythm where everyone gets together and discusses the merits of the data that you're looking at, increases the level of data quality, and then starts to work on the strategy.
Yeah. So I guess one of my questions, and maybe Jeff for you and for you too, Peter, is like, I think I heard you mention, kind of double down, focus on the things that work, but, don't necessarily oversaturate yourself in any one particular channel, right? So how do folks, whether you're a RevOps practitioner, supporting your CRO, you're a MOps practitioner supporting your marketing team, how can folks be thinking about providing the right level of support to their leadership, or if you're leading your own department there, right? Like how do you strive to find that balance, right, as you put together maybe your plan for next year?
This is the question, like, how do we resource these teams and make sure they're not?
Yeah, or how do you think about how do you think about doubling down on the things that work while not putting all your eggs in one basket, right? Not saturating yourself too much, right? How should folks think about striking that balance?
Take a crack at it. So my first thing is to look at baselines from last year versus this year, and do a proportional drop or proportional share against the new total of spend. And then figuring out where I can redistribute or reallocate different budgets. There are some telltale signs for whether you have diminishing margin return. So one thing I'll look at is when's the last time we refreshed our creative and our messaging. 2, how are we building target audiences? And so if you're using tools like metadata or Primer, they have specific mechanisms in their tools that allow you to go out and build those targets. If you're on paid social or paid search, for example, you may only get demographic. You may not be able to specifically target special titles and that's okay, right? So your cost per lead or cost per MQL or cost per SEO, whatever your core metric's going to be, are going to vary and differ on those channels. And so what I'm looking for is, what is my blended cost of SAO or sales accepted opportunity that I want to drive, and then work backwards from there. Also, if I see fatigue in any of these channels, I might want to like rotate the creative or rotate the audiences, or maybe even lower the bids depending on the mechanism, the platform you're using, and then start to reallocate resources to other areas. For this year, for example, like we did a lot of trade shows. I don't think we're going to be going out as much with trade shows. We're going to highly concentrate to the events that represent a strong branding opportunity for us, and also are clustered closely to regional centers where we do sell well, because we can set up customer meetings as well. So there's a dual benefit to that. And so that I think about what are the trade-offs that we want to force and make, but it all drives towards like pipeline. But I am a big advocate for making sure you leave a good portion of it for brand.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess I heard like, start with some sort of baseline or base case, Jeff, right? That might be, what you did, like where you started from last year, right? Performance, where you invested, what your outcomes were. Then adjust that base case, that baseline for how things are looking for you next year, and then consider the reality, I guess, of your ability to kind of hit those numbers. And like you said, is there fatigue in any particular channel? Should we expect an uptick in any particular channel? Is there downside going in? And what's the kind of most realistic, kind of case going forward? Yeah, go ahead, Camela.
I'd just love to jump in. So something I've found effective, especially in earlier stage companies, when it comes to evaluating which campaigns and tactics are worth doing and worth not doing, is using the data you have and not waiting until you have a perfect environment. So I'm really lucky. I have multi-touch attribution. I have funnels. I have all the things I need, but use what you have. And there are going to be some things that you can't measure. So what I usually do is I'll have a list of campaigns. I'll have the tactic. They convert at different rates. I understand that. And then I want to see how effective they are in lead generation, how effective they are in deals that are already in flight, so influence. And then I want qualitative feedback from the people who participated in, let's say, the event. So using those 3 factors or 2 factors or whatever you have, use what you can. Don't wait for perfection. Start using things consistently and looking for trends and then making decisions based on those trends. The other thing I will say is that I think that I said enough. I'll stop now.
Yeah.
I think there's one more thing that I'm really thinking about, which is your website is a product. It's a superpower that a company has. So all these ad platforms get you to the website. But once you get to the website, and if your site is utter junk, and you have no compelling call to action or call to value or the discussion of using modals or not, pop-ups, how do you get your baseline rate from website visitor to sign up? Like if you can find a way to like increase that, just like 10%, 15%, it makes a world of difference.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned it, Jeff, right? Like what's your call to action or your call to value, right? Like some of those things need to change. And yeah, especially like name of the game, right? Do more with less is like, and if you can't, if you can't increase volume, how can you improve conversion rates, right? Same thing in, just more out, right? And that's where a refresh of that can be highly valuable. So I see you shaking your head, Peter. Anything you want to add to what Jeff or Camela said?
We're really big on velocity. So for us, it's about experimentation and experimentation at scale, well documented. So I think we're a bit earlier than everyone else, but a lot of what we're doing is throwing shit at a wall and seeing what sticks, right? You have your programs that you know are going to produce a certain amount of output, whether it's, sales qualified opportunity or demo or however you measure it. But for us, it's like, can you come to me or whoever is the head of that group with a pretty quick down and dirty template of like, here's what I want to test, why I want to test it, what it's going to cost, and here's my expectation of success. And comparing those apples to apples, whether that's on like impressions, dollars spent, the amount of sends or something like that. We're trying to look at like program level CAC and program level exposure as it relates to those, metrics we're trying to generate. So for us, it's really like, can you create an environment and a culture where it's okay to screw up? It's also, expected that there's going to be a high velocity of things we're going to try. And we have people that are like, I want to try this TikTok thing, or I want to try, this sort of outbound tool. And all of it's on the table. I mean, obviously you got to work within budgets, but if you can kind of create an easy way for people to test, iterate, and expand on ideas, and then have very well-defined buckets of, hey, this is the cost or amount we're going to invest for a test. Here's like the resource limit. And then let's do it to initial scale. If it keeps producing at the levels to kind of Jeff's point of a baseline, let's now move that to a scaled campaign and track those programmatic program level metrics on them. And that's kind of how we've had a lot of success creating areas that we're really proud of, that we continue to invest in. And I think Camela also mentioned one of our favorite ones is like, when everyone else in your market's talking about something, you got to talk about something else. I don't care if you have a product that reduces churn. If 200 people in your Gartner quadrant or whatever are talking about churn, like, sorry, your message is dead. No one's going to hear it because the guy or woman who can spend more money than you is going to scream churn louder. So a lot of what we've been doing is like Baton helps on churn. We sell to customer success and rev ops teams, but we also have the exact same product, but focused on a different persona, which is like, how do we help you move more booked revenue to build revenue? And same people, same thing, but just instead of targeting that like VP of CSM, who's probably going to use the tool anyway, we go to the CRO or the CFO or the CEO, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, your KPI is this. All my competitors are still talking about churn. They're not getting that person's ear. So if you can find a bigger problem and someone with, who's always going to pay for revenue, and I could pretty much guarantee most teams will always pay if they think you can generate more revenue, regardless of what budget scenario they're in. That's what we're doing a lot of. And then we're creating a cultural organization of like, let's experiment really fast, kill things that don't work, and scale things that do.
Yeah. I like that. One, big focus on differentiation. And I think like everybody should always challenge themselves to, even if you're in a highly commoditized space, like you can be different. You just got to communicate that and kind of cut through the noise. And then the other thing that, Aaron and other folks on my team can attest to as well is like, strong bias for action. Like go out and do some stuff. Like we're not going to get anywhere if all we do is plan for the next 3 months. But like you talk about like we should maybe build TikTok into our strategy. It's like, okay, what can we do today to learn something about that? Like go out and like create a business TikTok account and like post a video. Like, I don't know, let's have a goal for some sort of like views or click-throughs to our website. Let's just like do something today, tomorrow, like now to figure out if that works, right? And then we learn, we iterate, we can it, or we go on to the next thing, or we double down on that, right? Because things don't need to be expensive or hard, right? From the start, like you can do something today. And I think that's the other piece is like challenge yourself to figure out like if you had to do something in the next 2 hours for something brand new, like how would you do it, right? It can be done, guaranteed. Just got to figure it out. So I like that. Well, and actually, so on that, I guess, well, you talked about a little bit, Peter, with your, obviously like the space that you all are in. post-sale process, talking about all the normal standard things, right? Like, hey, we reduce churn and we'll help you keep more customers, right? Like, whether you're looking at product A, B, or C, everyone's, kind of talking about that. So as we look at the post-sale process, specifically, right, for any, sort of company out there, what are some things that, folks should maybe be considering, as it relates to like the sales to implementation handoff, the implementation process itself, like anything that goes on, kind of post sale? What are some things that people should be thinking about next year that can, like you said, maybe help them accelerate revenue or drive revenue growth that they may not have been thinking about before?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really important question because like a lot of what RevOps does, like how do we move revenue through the organization? And, we started this company because we saw a lot of it getting stuck once sales handed it off to services, delivery, whoever, success. I think one of the things you need to do is like look internally, understand like what stage your business is at. Do you have a standard process? Can you actually create a predictable, path to value for your customer where it's, I don't know, 90 days every time customer buys a mid-market, whatever package. And if you could do that, now it's time to start thinking about like, how do I accelerate that time to value? Because the faster I get someone from signed contract to build, the more recurring revenue or however you guys recognize revenue you're going to get. And that's ultimately what we're valued off of. To Jeff's earlier point, like you need that operating income to keep funding the business. Like I would be thinking about like, how do I get my customers from like the yes to, we have their credit card or we have their ACH, and smoothing that process, whether it's with software or other tools. And then I think one of the things we're pushing a lot of our customers with is, if you do have a standard process that you feel pretty good, we're branded as like a running company that sells software. So we talk a lot about like marathon pace and race pace in these sort of analogies. But like, if you feel good about your race pace, like it might be time to look external. Like, can you actually get some third parties to be ecosystem partners to deliver, integrate, configure your tool? And the added benefit there is they also usually distribute your tool if they make a lot of money doing software integration. So they'll actually become another set of boots on the ground that probably knows more about what's going on with their customers than you do. And we've seen a number of companies like go from like, hey, we have this thing in a spreadsheet all the way through to they adopt Baton or someone else's tool that helps them gain that visibility and acceleration. Now they can use that to also manage, mini versions of Accenture and, Jeff Consulting so that, Jeff can go distribute and be a partner of yours. And that just amplifies your reach in a time when like you might not be able to pay for that 10 more person in your professional services team or success. But guess what? Like there's a firm out there that is already paying the OpEx for those employees with specialized talent on the ground where you need to be, that wants to distribute your tool as long as you're like prepared and have all the bumpers ready to go.
Yeah, I like that. So I'm hearing like, implementation experience, one, just providing a delightful one. Obviously, first impressions mean a lot, right? So you want your customers to stick around now more than ever. So like, delight them from the very first interaction they have. And two, one of the ways that you can accelerate revenue in 2023 is to shorten the time to value, the time to that booked revenue. And whether that's with an improved implementation process, implementation software, right? Lots of things that you can do there. But if you can take that from say 6 months to 3 months, you've added 3 months of revenue recognition, right, into your calendar year that did not exist before. And now multiply that out by however many implementations you can get live next year, right? You can see real dollars impacting that. And then I guess the last thing you mentioned, Peter, was like, depending on your stage, like you said, if you feel good about your implementation process, consider outsourcing, because there's not only the impact to save some dollars on, say, hard costs like hiring an implementation manager, right? You outsource that to someone else, they can do it for you, but there's referral revenue there too, because if they like your product and if they make money off of implementing it, chances are, they're probably going to tell some other people about it too. So good. Those are all great. Great things. Jeff, I mean, what about you? I mean, Forethought is, obviously in the the kind of post-sale, space as well, but anything you want to add there?
Can I do a quick plug? Forethought is is a AI powered tool that helps power the future of CX, where we believe The future is human-centered AI. All right, now the plug's over. I think we play more in the support space, right, rather than kind of the offense. So when I think about CS operations or CX operations, there's a twofold objective. The first is the sword, or playing offense, and that's where I think the CSM. So think about onboarding, adoption, engagement, business reviews, and then early renewals, and hopefully renewing with upsells, upsell dollar amounts, or getting early renewals as much as possible. The second piece of and then also building all the signals that allow you to understand the health of the customer, while also proactively increasing NPS and CSAT, and turning your customers into loyal evangelists, which also creates the flywheel by introducing and increasing word of mouth, which then also lowers your cost of acquisition for future customers, because no one loves buying more from someone they trust. The second part of the CX operations arm, which I like to focus on, is the support side of it. So it's the reactive, the shield. So part of that is thinking through, what are the different channels that you want to support, email, chat, phone, et cetera. How do you deflect and create FAQs to hopefully increase the ability, reduce reply rates, and also increase time to resolution on a self-serve basis. So when I'm thinking about the CX side of the house for next year, those are the things that I'm thinking through, the big blocks, and then how are we going to support that through process enablement, advisory, and systems? Like the core pillars that I always think about RevOps. Yeah,
and I guess I guess this question is for all of you, but I guess kind of listening to some of the things that you're bringing up, I mean, for next year, especially whether you're a RevOps practitioner, marketing ops, CS ops, sales ops, biz ops, or just a marketing leader, a revenue leader, a sales leader, I think, is it fair to say that, there's a bunch of metrics, KPIs, right, that, you can look at to, evaluate your performance, things that you want to move the needle on. And maybe next year, the focus should be not how can I get more dollars to spend on this thing, right? Not how can I increase the amount of stuff going in, but how can I improve my efficiency within those things, right? With whether it's current resources, current tools, right? So like you said, Jeff, if you're looking at something like, time to resolution, right? Your first thought should not be, how can I hire more people to field my current, level of support requests? But it should be, how can I decrease the amount of support requests? Maybe I, throw out some FAQ documentation on my website, or maybe there's a feature of a current tool that, we haven't utilized before, right? What are those things that you can do with the current resources that you have to improve the efficiency, the output across those different areas? And actually, on that note, I mean, right, you all either running companies, leading departments, running RevOps, sales ops, marketing ops. Talk about, like, maybe on, call it the, you as a buyer, right? Like, what are some of those things that you're challenging your teams to do, or maybe that you're doing in evaluating your own tech stack, or, where you're going to invest your RevOps resources, or your team's RevOps resources next year? Like, what are some of those things that you all are doing that, maybe some other folks could consider too? Whoever wants to take it first.
I guess I'll run with it. So one of the things we're doing internally is we're instructing our revenue operations team to stop delivering reports and start delivering insights. So when people ask for numbers, come to them with observations. You can't assume that everybody in your company does pattern matching and can spot these things. So when somebody asks for how many meetings did my team do last month, do a 12-month run, look for patterns, point them out, figure out if people are on pace ahead. I mean, and meetings is a terrible example, but it is an example. Some of the things that we're looking at doing internally is funnel conversion rates and figuring out where there's sticking points between teams, figuring out which campaign tactics are the most effective. There's a lot of things we're trying to do to make what we're already doing more efficient. So, and I think revenue operations is perfectly positioned to do that, but make sure that you're adding value and not just checking a box and doing the report.
Yeah. Someone asks for something, don't just deliver it, but maybe ask why. Why do you want to know that? What are you trying to figure out? Oh, let me help you with that. So, yeah. Jeff, what about you?
So you mean doing more doing more with less internally, or kind of like supporting the revenue base for next year externally?
Yeah, or what, like, I know you mentioned, in some of our kind of prep calls, like some of the things that you were doing, whether it was evaluating your own tech stack,
Oh, yeah.
looking at areas where you can consolidate, things you might be asking your vendors, like just, yeah, like what can RevOps, marketing ops, sales ops teams do next year to support their kind of business efforts, right? In terms of where they might be investing their time or dollars or resources.
Yeah. So the first thing that I think of is I need to let the smoke clear, meaning that I need to figure out what is the baseline org going to look like walking in. So at the vendor level, I am looking at cutting nice to haves. I am looking at consolidating. So companies and vendors that offer bundles are a huge attraction for me on a vendor basis. So one-off tools, unfortunately, are kind of the first on the chopping block. The second is preparing. If you have suffered through a layoff, you have a smaller team, but the work level has definitely increased on a per capita level. So focusing on what are the capabilities that we need to unlock in the org, what is keeping the lights on mean, and what are some of the kind of projects that I may not be able to fund from a resource perspective. So having those hard conversations around what are the goals for next year, what are our objectives, what are the projects and initiatives that are going to meet those objectives, and then having the conversation of what's on the priority stack, P0 all the way down to P3. The second thing is really looking at tools or software or processes or people that are going to help us move the bar. The fact that there are more people out there in the marketplace allows us to have a thoughtful hiring strategy as well. So really thinking through who's going to help us not produce at a 1x, but who's going to help us produce at a 1.5x and shorten that time to value at a number of different areas. And we also consider the same thing in terms of tools. So I'm comfortable evaluating and having conversations with vendors if it's going to yield and not just a net shift of spend, but also a net shift, a fundamental accretive level of productivity to the business. And so where I think internally, focusing on enablement, developing career paths, formalizing those, allowing folks to think through if I could achieve these objectives. And then what does stretch look like beyond that, and then developing some sort of reward promotion path for different folks. And so that way you're building culture, and you're also building a culture, a meritocratic ladder within the business. Those are things that I'm thinking through.
Yeah, I like it. Peter, what about what about you from the CEO perspective, right? Any challenges that you're kind of handing down to your ops team, or how are you kind of evaluating kind of your own RevOps team and RevOps org for next year?
Yeah, so I think we've talked a lot, and I'm going to harp on something Jeff mentioned earlier. Like, a lot of our conversations about conversion right now, right? Whether we're testing new things, using scaled programs, every dollar that I can put somewhere, I'm looking for the maximum return on that dollar. And if you're not focused on, I think Jeff may have mentioned, like, your website, is it optimized based on who's landing on it? Do you have different success stories, outcomes, all these other things? Like, the verbiage can change. Like, we have tools that do all this stuff, but I would say for RevOps or more broadly marketing, we're seeing a lot of like, hey, does every dollar need to go into demand gen? No, like, if I shift the ratio from like 80-20 to like 60-40, and I spend more of that new dollars on conversion, that actually usually yields me a higher ROI or a better CAC, whatever I'm doing. And I think that often gets overlooked, whether it's like funneling in on the sectors, segments, personas, however you guys look at it, that work, doing a lot of that. And then, to Jeff's point, we look at a lot of, like, as we talk about it, leverage points, like, where are single points of failure, where are there multi points of failure, and can we either level those up? Can we do something to improve the output of that group? Because we continually look at, to your question earlier, like planning for the next year, like, we're going to have to either, do more in some departments with the same amount of people. Some departments get a little bit more, maybe in other companies, some get less. Like, how are you actually going to pull off those like utilization ratios? And like, to my thought like leverage. And I think sometimes we look at like, do we invest in software that can actually help us for one person get the output of 5 versus hiring, and now we just have 2 people doing the output of 2. I would rather pay, to have that double output and try and test that.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And so let's see, we're coming up, we got like 15 minutes left. So we've talked about kind of planning, right? The planning process a little bit. We've talked about, still investing in new business growth, how we can do some things that, maybe our competitors aren't doing, right? Or maybe our competitors were doing, but now they've stopped doing there, where we can invest and spend some dollars. I guess we haven't talked too much about like specifically expansion revenue, or like renewal rates and things that we can do to, like drive improvements there, right? Obviously, like any improvements on the renewal rate side are going to mean more revenue retention that you can hold on to next year. Expansion, revenue as well is inherently driven from your existing customer base. So in the past, those may not have been maybe top of the priority list, especially if, say new business was flowing in. But, what are some things that folks should be thinking about next year? Now, Camela, maybe for you on the marketing side, right? Like, are you investing things in customer marketing to, I don't know, like, drive expansion revenue? What do those things look like? And then 2, just curious on, product marketing, right? Like, are there things there that can be done to, maybe have an impact on, who's successful with your product and, therefore renewal rates as well?
Oh, yes and yes. Yes. So if you have a presence on G2, go read the reviews, take everything to heart and figure out where you can improve your product. Do opportunity interviews, both won and lost. Talk to your customers as much as possible. We're starting a customer advisory board, and that's another great way to get input. And then anytime we do product development, we interact with a subset of our customers to make sure we're on the right track. So that's like part of delighting the customer. On the product marketing side, think of Trailblazers and Salesforce and their help documentation. It is fantastic and it keeps people engaged. So make sure that you have materials that are easily accessible that people can access. And a really great thing to keep in mind is that you need to talk about use cases and where other customers are finding success, not just how to click where. So always start every article, and my department runs this. We start with what's in it for you, what you're going to gain out of it, and have a video, how other people use it, and then go into the how-to. So always start everything anywhere on your website or any material with what's in it for them. Learn this in sales operations really early on in my career. You have to start with what's in it for them. So in terms of expansion, the reason why I mentioned going to G2 and figuring out that input, if you can identify a current gap that is easy for your team to solve and productize it, that is a great opportunity for expansion, or even just delighting your current customers with an additional feature. And that improves your chance of renewal. Mm-hmm. So all of the things I mentioned, these are all related to renewals. But the best material you can have as a marketer is customer evidence. So delighting those customers, helping the rest of the organization however you can. Like, it's my responsibility to enable the rest of the organization to delight customers. And I'm going to do that however I can, because I know that's the key to unlocking both upsells and new logos.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I mean, you've got, again, like I think Peter, you said it, right? Like your website is a product, or maybe Jeff, you said, I can't remember which one of you guys brought that up. Like, we all have these things that we do, right? We've all got websites. We've all got FAQ documents, right? Like, we've all got support docs. We've got all of these things out there. And, now's the time, right? Like, how can we get creative with the stuff that we've got, right? Like, Camela, you just brought up, on the sales ops side, if you're, trying to, do anything in your CRM or anything else, and you want your salespeople to do something different, like, you've got to start with like, what's in it for them, right? Same thing. If you were writing out a bunch of like documentation for your customer, if you want them to use it or you want them to read it, like, tell them what's in it for them, right? And maybe give them an example of someone else like them who has gotten value in the same way, right? And that's going to compel compel them to, compel you to get the outcome that you want. And so, yeah, I love, like, look at the things that you got and figure out how you can get creative with those things. But Peter, Jeff, anything you want to add on the kind of expansion or renewal rate side that you all might be looking at this year? Oh, you're on mute, Jeff.
I was on mute.
Yeah.
I was just codifying some thoughts I just dropped in the chat as well. My first thought is, if you're a user seats-based pricing model, you're actually facing some headwinds, particularly in companies that are now, reducing seats. So you're actually up against a hard stop for expansion. And so one thing to potentially consider is revisit your the value and usage model, and then maybe tying remuneration to it somehow. I wouldn't say pivot your pricing model, but just think through it. But second is, 2 years ago, we talked about renew is the new. And here we are again, 24 months later, facing the same conversation. Take care of home base, renew your customers. And I think there's a couple of ways you can do that. You need to become a need to have. You can solve that through product. You can solve that through messaging. You can solve that through service. And hopefully you're doing all three of those. Two is, build trust and the people who use your product, that it is a hard rip out, right? If you rip you out of that business, their careers are sunk or the business is sunk. And the only way to do that is to provide tremendous value. Three, internally, is to get extremely organized. Your T-minus 190 process for early renewals, I would expand that. Get to T-minus 120, 150, and get ahead of it with business reviews. And so those are some thoughts in my mind. Expansion. If you're not already doing this, get plugged into your product roadmap as soon as possible and start doing a T-minus 180 and start thinking through product marketing, market positioning, SWOT analysis, product marketing, sales enablement, work backwards so that you can land that customer, land that go to market as early as possible, and then start thinking through incentives and comp as well for both your CSMs and your account managers. And if your AEs are involved with your expansion, you have to be really crisp and tight in an environment like this.
Yep. What about you, Peter? Last one on the expansion or renewal side.
So hammer again, what Camela said, like, we're really big on outcomes and artifacts. So if you work with Baton, when we do discovery, you will tell us what you're trying to solve for. Every time you meet with, we call them success engineers, so the people on our success org, they will bring up a map of your customer journey towards that and how you've been achieving that by using us versus the baseline of what you were doing prior to us. So if you want to rip us out, like, you're going back to that, like, double, triple, whatever the cost, 10x the time to get the same thing done. And we also give a lot of artifacts to our users, right? We want to make them look really good in their organization. So if they can run to their boss, like, holy crap, we just unlocked 10 grand more revenue from this customer. We just did this. I just made this 4 times faster. And we recognize that revenue in a quarter as opposed to in 6 months. Those are things that get people promoted, especially when, like, you're letting people go and there's ways to retain people by promoting them, and it's a way to, like, make your user highlighted in the organization, and they usually don't forget the product that did that with them, and they take you everywhere else they go. So I would say, like, artifacts, and remind people about the outcome. Like, we do a lot of timelines, and we'll be like, hey Matt, like, here's what you said you wanted. We crushed it in 3 months, and now you're like 10 times better off than you were, but remember this baseline. To Jeff's point, like, remember when it wasn't going so hot?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I mean, it's people love tangible things, right? Like things that you can show, even if that means, like, here was your process before our tool, and now here's your process afterwards, and it's like a couple of slides, right? But, like, you can you can show them the value that you add, and like you said, they can take that and kind of run with it internally. And I think too, I'll go back, like, you brought up that, Peter. I think Camela, you brought up before, like, don't focus on like perfection, right? Don't let perfection get in the way of progress. Like, again, don't assume that you need things to be, like, totally hammered out or 100% accurate 100% of the time. Like, there's ways to to get a starting point, right, with what you need. So again, going back, like challenge yourself to figure out how can you deliver an artifact to your customers tomorrow, right? That can do just that, right? Do just what Peter mentioned. I think, challenge yourself to do that. You can probably get it done. All right. So in the last couple of minutes here, just want to go around the horn and see like what else, whether it's, I'll just open up like 2023 more broadly, whether it's like RevOps related, revenue related, whatever it might be. What are some other things outside of expansion revenue, renewal rates, customer marketing, new business? We talked about implementation, post-sale. Anything else that folks should consider for next year that, could be that differentiator or that thing that, maybe they haven't thought of, but, could get them huge ROI, right? Whether that's like, I don't know, we brought up like domain deliverability or like, going omni-channel with your SDR team or like just anything else. Like, what are some of those things that you all might recommend folks consider? And I guess, Camela, let's start with you.
Oh, and I'm going to take the domain deliverability and run with it because not enough people are talking about this, dang it. So SalesLoft, outreach administrators, go into the back end where it's company settings, look at how many emails you're allowing per day and throttle it, because unless your sales team is on a separate domain that you already warmed up for them, they are destroying your deliverability and you're going to start hearing people complain about landing in spam filters, which is really hard to monitor. And if anybody tells you that they know whether or not you're landing in spam, they're lying to you because it's really difficult to tell. So test out some emails to some of your friends, make sure they're getting them in their primary inbox and go throttle that, or you're going to be in a world of hurt, because email is still a highly effective tool when used properly.
Like it.
And so,
all right, Jeff, Jeff, what about you? I hope Camela didn't steal your anything on domain deliverability.
No, not at all. I would say go back to basics. Rethink through your motion. What are your touch points with your customers? And then what do you bring to the table and what are the core outcomes you try to drive? And make sure you remember that, if you have a value journey map or something like a tool like that allows you to see like, here were your goals that you stated. Has anything changed? Here's where you are, and here's where you are against those goals. And just get really organized around and bear hug your customers, right? Is at least in the enterprise segment, that's how I'm thinking about it. For the SMB, exactly, get your email deliverability right. So it's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, that's great. All right, Peter.
We're just doing more with the customers we have, right? If you've got some logos that everyone looks up to, lean into that and do what almost ever they want. We have people that want to throw like a beer pong tournament or go to an aquarium and have that sponsored. And we're like, fine, if you want to bring 15 organizations that look like you, we will be there and be happy to make you custom t-shirts. It's simple. Simple things, to Jeff's points, are the ones that work. But now it's up.
I like that. All right, awesome. Thanks, Peter. All right, y'all. Well, with that, we are coming up at the top of the hour, so let's wrap things up. First off, big thank you to all of the panelists. Camela, Jeff, Peter, thank you all very much. Really appreciate the questions, the thoughts, the dialogue, everything that y'all contributed. So thank you very much for that. As a reminder for everybody, this event is recorded. We are going to put it up on our website in a few weeks, along with some written copy as well. So keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, the folks at Baton are probably going to be following up with registrants and attendees afterwards with at least a kind of raw recording too. So keep an eye out for that. If you want to learn more about RevOps Co-op, sign up for the free community. Like I said, you can do that at revopscoop.com. And of course, if you want to learn more about Baton, you can do that at Hello Baton. I think we threw the link in the chat before. Last but not least, whether you want to get in touch with Camela, Jeff, Peter, myself, Aaron, anybody here, you can find us all on LinkedIn. But with that, thanks again for your time. And I'm going to let you all run and have a great rest of your day. So we'll see y'all. Thank you.